Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mom's Corner. I hope everyone's doing well today. I'm Zainab, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. I want to thank everyone for joining us. And for those who are regulars on Mom's Corner, thank you for being here. And for those who are joining us for the first time, welcome and thank you. Before we proceed, I want to remind everyone that, as promised, we will issue the stipends for our session today at the end of the meeting. And I encourage everyone to participate in any way they can. You can open your camera, send questions to the chat box, or just use the emoji features if you would like. Please make sure to change your screen name to match the name that we'll be sending it to so that we have the right one. And if you would like help with doing that, I can definitely help you with that. A brief introduction about Mom's Corner. Mom's Corner is one of the many umbrellas under the one of the many programs under the umbrella of Global Perinatal Services, or GPS. And GPS is a nonprofit doing some amazing work in changing lives every day. Our mission is to provide community-based doula services that will educate, respect, and empower low-income Black, refugee, and immigrant women and their families during pregnancy, birth, and into early parenting. And Mom's Corner is a space not just for moms, but for all women folk and supporters of women. At GPS, we believe that motherhood is an extension of a woman's identity and not the definition. And so Mom's Corner really has become, since the pandemic, not just a space where we come to find empathy, support, and camaraderie, but a safe haven and access to so many critical resources in our communities. And today we are here to learn about and talk about Juneteenth. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Juneteenth, it is a holiday celebrated on June 19th to commemorate the emancipation of enslaved people in the U.S. And I'm so honored and blessed to have my friend Joe Bourgeois here as a special guest, and who will offer more insight on the significance of this holiday. But before I do, I want to preface and ground our discussion about Juneteenth today. I want to refer back to our mission, our organization's mission statement and its relevant commemoration of Juneteenth. Some people might wonder, why would an organization that was founded and run by someone who identifies as a refugee and also caters to refugees and immigrants, families, and communities celebrate or care about Juneteenth? What do immigrants and refugees know about the Black experience, Black struggles, and the unforgivable and unforgettable horrors of slavery, and the inequities and inequalities still impacting African Americans today? And the thinking behind this argument perhaps is because some of us cannot lay claim to the legacy of American chattel slavery in the same way as Black African Americans can. And thus, in many ways, our plight is divorced from theirs. And while this is true, the fact remains that despite our ancestral differences, the plight of Black people, regardless of immigration or residency status in the United States, is almost universally dismal. And according to one source, Black people retain the lowest median income and are currently enjoying the lowest rate of Black home ownership since the 1960s, and are disproportionately stopped, arrested, or fatally killed by the police. And in the healthcare system, Black women are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women in the US, and Black infants still die twice at the rate as white infants today. And I don't want to sound negative or bring anyone down with that, but I wanted to put things into perspective and to say that yes, while our organization is one that partly caters to immigrants and refugees, these statistics prove that despite our differences mean nothing, because we're all impacted by inherently racist systems in one way or another. So today's session on Juneteenth is a recognition and celebration of Black resilience and power, and our demonstration of our solidarity with our African American brothers and sisters. So I wanted to ground us with that, and with that, Joe, I will hand it to you. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sister Zainab. I appreciate you. That introduction was beautiful. The foundation, the elements of which we all should stand on. I was just capturing some of the things that you mentioned. It definitely impacts us all because we are from the same homeland, right? Mother Africa. She gave birth to all of us. And the plight is universal with those statistics that you provided. You know, whether it be an immigrant or an American, Black American that's been in this country for, you know, years because of their family, it's all our plight. And we have to have unity as we stand together. Because, you know, when I see someone from African descent being mistreated, it impacts me. When I see a fellow brother of American descent that's Black being mistreated, it affects me. If I see a brown brother, Latino, it impacts me, because at the core of it, we are human beings. And so we should be united in that. And so I'm blessed by the opportunity to come and share just for a few moments. I've done this before with Sister Zainab, and if you guys, Mother's Corner, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I just love to share on these topics. I'm very passionate about, Black American history in our country. And so I have a presentation, but I want you guys to be interactive. So there's some questions, and I'm hopeful that you will turn on your mic. You don't necessarily have to turn your camera on. I understand that disposition, but I would like for you to engage, because, it's all about perspective and discourse. And so without further ado, I'll jump into it. I am Joe Bourgeois. I have known Sister Zainab for about maybe 3 years now, since COVID time. We interacted through another educator, and so we connected again, and we just kind of stayed in contact, just checking on each other, sister brother type love. And here I am. So I've been in education I just finished my 12th year in education. I am a 6th grade social studies teacher at Sylvester Middle School in Burien. And I have a police background, I have a military background, and I have, I love learning. I love learning about various cultures, and I love especially learning about our history, because the fable I believe it goes, if you're not aware of your history, you won't be aware of your future. And so it's important for us to know, where we came from and how we got to this place where we are right now. So I created a presentation, and I'm going to share my screen so we can go ahead and get started here. And so it is a lot of information. And so I'm going to do the best I can, because I have so much in my brain, right? Like so much about this history. I'm going to try to stay streamlined. But again, I'll ask that you capture it in whatever way you can, via some notes or some things like that. So here is our table of contents here. So we're going to talk about, the what and the why of Juneteenth, a little bit of historical relevance. And we're going to talk about the emancipation, because there's a lot of misconceptions within the emancipation. And then we're going to talk about the journey that it took to be nationally recognized. And I just have some questions I want to pose to you guys regarding that. And then, like Sister Zainab said earlier with her introduction, is, how can we become unified? How can we become, more aware? And so here's some things that you can do, some practical things that you can try on in your own home. Again, it doesn't directly affect you as, a Black American, but it does affect you as, a Black American, because I believe, as a police officer, if they see one of our, Muslim brothers, they're going to assume that he's just like a Black American, right? So there is no disparities when it comes to that, because, there are some cases in New York where there were some young men that were really brutalized by, police officers, because they looked and acted and conducted themselves in a way that, Black Americans did. So they were treated the same. So there's no difference in my heart. We're all the same. we all have to be unified. So that's our table of contents. So Juneteenth, the what and the why. So Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, there are a lot of different names, but it actually came about on June 19th of 1865 in Galveston, Texas. The order was delivered by General Granger, Gordon Granger. But so there's some things in there where the South had different aspects where Texas wasn't very, the Union soldiers didn't police Texas in the way that they policed some of the other southern states like Alabama and Mississippi and things like that. So the reason why it took so long, as you see the third bullet, it says the order came 2.5 years after the initial rendering of the Emancipation Proclamation. And so a lot of people question, like, why did it take so long? Well, it took that long because actually that's when 2.5 years until the date was when General Granger had to come down to read the order himself. Because back in that time, if you were a Black enslaved individual, you didn't know, they didn't want you to learn how to read. So you were very illiterate. And then enslavers wanted to continue to get the last bit of labor from their enslaved. So there's a lot of systemic things, even in that component of taking 2.5 years for the message to be sent. So Juneteenth was born out of joy and jubilation, because this is the last remaining enslaved people in the country. And of course, there was a joy, and there was excitement, and there was jubilee. It was Freedom Day, and they were free. But the emancipation, what a lot of people don't understand, is that the emancipation didn't actually set them free. However, the 13th Amendment, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, is what really gave birth to the ending of slavery. So there's a couple names: Freedom Day, Emancipation Day. You might hear that when you hear about Juneteenth. And so that was the 13th Amendment, like I mentioned before. So that's a little brief history of it. But I want to ask the question to the forum here: what in your mind makes you think of why they took so long to deliver the message? What are some things that you can think of? So you can turn your mic on, or type it in the chat. What are some things, some reasons that you might think why it took so long for the message to fully get read by General Gordon Granger? Is there anyone who wants to share out? This reminds me of when I was on Zoom with my students. It's like nobody wants to say anything, and that's totally fine. That's okay. So as we go through the presentation, hopefully, some things will click and you guys will share. But if not, that's okay. I'll just move on to the next slide, which is going to be the history. So I kind of gave a little historical context there, but this is what really dives deep into it. The Emancipation Proclamation was issued by Abraham Lincoln on January 1st of 1863. So this is still during the Civil War. And so during the time of this proclamation, believe it or not, Abraham Lincoln wasn't really trying to, he didn't really care if the slaves were freed or not. He was really trying to keep the United States united. And so an order was issued to the Confederate States stating that you have 100 days from this order to release your, get rid of your slaves, the enslaved, or, you're going to face the consequences. But of course, the South wasn't trying to do that. So they just kept going on, and the war continued on. And so when the war actually ended, when, General Lee surrendered, that's when the proclamation finally got delivered to Galveston, Texas, and all those things. But the real point that I want to make here is that the 13th Amendment is what actually abolished the slavery, ending it completely. But there's a clause in there that we're going to talk about that I want you guys to pay really close attention to. But freedom established a tradition known as Jubilee Day on the June 19th, 1866. So 1866 was a year after. So there was some freed community, the remembrance of the day that happened, where they were actually set free. Yeah. And so it started from I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you were just freezing in and out.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting right here next to my router too. It's kind of after that in 1866, it kind of spread a little bit, but it was mostly in Texas. It was mostly in Texas because Texas was the final state to really abolish slavery. So it officially became a Texas state holiday in 1979. So Texas was the only state to actually commemorate and celebrate Juneteenth as a recognized state holiday. All other 48 states or 49 states in the country didn't recognize it. They had certain days that they would recognize later on. But it wasn't until June of 2021 where it actually became a federal recognized holidays. So there are state recognized holidays, and then there are federally recognized holidays where the states have the, they can observe it or not. Some choose to say that it's going to be on this day. Some choose to follow what the government says, and so Juneteenth as a federal holiday. So the government says, hey, states, here's this federal holiday. We want you to observe it.
Joe, you keep freezing.
And the states will say, sure, we'll observe it. It's one of those 28 states that says Juneteenth is a holiday where everything will shut down and the government won't function. It's a paid day off for everybody that works in the state. So they recognize it for what it truly should be, a day of remembrance and observance here in Washington state. But there's other states like Alabama, Mississippi, all the real southern states, Louisiana, that don't really want to give the recognition to it. They want to hold on to that, that strain of, this was what we used to have. So they recognize it, they observe it, but it's not like it's going to happen every year. So the question is this holiday a federal holiday because of what took place in the summer of 2020? Remember what happened in 2020? George Floyd, right? The uprising and all the things that came to light. If those events didn't take place, would we have a federal holiday for Juneteenth? What do you guys think?
It's a tricky one. Yeah. Because police brutality has been happening for years, but I think George Floyd is one that has definitely kind of captured national attention because it was so televised. It moved so many people. So I think it might have something to do with it, but I don't think it was the reason why they did that.
Okay. Thank you, sister. Anyone else want to share out? So in my opinion, as a Black man who, studies and reads and understands the history of our people, our president, Joe Biden, and people can change, right? But he was a part of some bills with Bill Clinton. Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
You just got cut off again. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I believe that President Biden, our current president, he's changed a lot. But at one time, I didn't think he liked Black people very much because he created a couple bills with Bill Clinton, like the 3 strikes laws and the war on crime bills that had mass incarceration of young Black Americans, mostly males, because there was in the 80s, the early 90s, there was what epidemic was facing our country? Crack epidemic was facing our country. No fault to our own people because, we never had an opportunity to really gain any ground because every time we tried to gain something, it was taken from us, right? Hence, Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as an example. So Joe Biden created all these bills, and during the presidential debates between he and Trump, before he was elected president, he actually apologized in one of the debates to the Black community for his involvement in mass incarceration of Black people during his time in the Senate. So I believe that this is his atoning. This is his way of saying he's sorry so that people can say, oh, Joe Biden is a good guy. He gave Juneteenth, he nationally recognized Juneteenth as a federal holiday. So I believe that, and I'm not just, going against what Sister Zainab just mentioned. There has been, police brutality going on, but I believe that Joe Biden felt it necessary to say, you know what, this is the least I can do for all the harm that I've done. I'm going to create this national holiday. That way, every year for centuries to come, people can stop and observe and think about the atrocities that were taking place to Black bodies since our inception of this country. So that's why I feel that if it wasn't for the uprising of George Floyd, where he had to come out and speak directly to the travesties that were taking place, I honestly think that maybe there wouldn't have been a Juneteenth nationally recognized holiday. So that's just my thought. Does anyone have any comments on that? I'm gonna check the chat really quickly, Zainab. Okay. Was there anything in the chat? No. Okay, so
yep, Rahma
yeah.
asked, do you think it was giving just that? I guess she's talking to the Juneteenth holiday. It was giving just to shut us up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think not necessarily to, and thank you for that, to shut us up in regards to, you know, our voices, but I think it was more so an appeasing, like we have to do something, right? Or else the world is going to burn, right? Like, so we have to say that we're working hard, we're in solidarity, you know, this is what I want to do for the country, I want to do for Black Americans and everybody that is a representative of those people. So this is what we have to do. Unfortunately, I strongly believe that if George Floyd wouldn't have been captured on video, because do you guys know, and this is what I studied too, Sister Zainab, do you guys know, my last check, since George Floyd's murder in 2020, there have been, the last I checked, 246. The last I checked, it probably has risen since then, but there has been 246 unarmed Black males being shot by police since George Floyd's murder. So, you know, the national recognition of the holiday is great because it gives pause to everyone, right? To reflect on our history in this country. There wouldn't be a United States without having had enslaved individuals to basically build everything for this country, my beliefs. And so, yeah, Taylor says it's not enough. I agree. How terrible. Yes, it's very terrible, right? So that's just like to give you guys some perspective on, yes, there is the travesty that was George Floyd, the martyrism, I believe he was a martyr because it also opened the eyes to the entire world that this is still going on. This is supposed to be the freest country in the world, right? But yet Black Americans are still treated in the way that they're treated. And so it's not enough. However, it's a start, right? In forums such as this, where it's Mom's Corner with Sister Zainab and her sisters, forums like this to educate all people is, I think, what the intentionality was set for. So, but I'm just going to always believe that if it wasn't for George Floyd, this probably wouldn't be. All right, keep your comments coming in the chat. I appreciate that. So let's move on to what's next here. Emancipation. And so this is really heavy because a lot of people believe that the Emancipation Proclamation, which was the letter written by Abraham Lincoln to start the wheels in motion, is what set slavery free. But that's not really the case. So, as we talked about a little bit earlier, Emancipation Proclamation was issued by Abraham Lincoln on January 1st of 1863. However, it wasn't really signed. It wasn't really established until September of 1863. But you see this second bullet here? It says, all enslaved people in the states currently engaged in rebellion against the Union. And so a lot of people say, oh, the Emancipation set all enslaved people free. That's a fallacy. It did not. It was only for the warring states, because did you guys know, and I'm gonna pull up my information on my phone, that there were I want to say 6 states or 5 states that did not secede from the Union, which means they didn't break away. They stayed intact. So I don't know where my information went, but it was like Maryland, Kentucky, Tennessee, I want to think. There were all the states that they were kind of the neutral states, but they still held slaves. So the emancipation didn't touch those states. It didn't free those slaves when the enslaved persons in those states. It only targeted Alabama, Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Virginia, right? North Carolina. It only those slave holding states is what that was supposed to, represent. And so it says, shall be then thenceforth forever free. But it didn't happen because the enslavers in the South were like, we're just going to die until, we're going to die with slavery. So the war continued on for 2 more years, right? And so in December 1865, the 13th Amendment was ratified. And so here's what the 13th Amendment states. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to this jurisdiction. So I highlighted that because I really want us to take a look at, and that's why I have a question mark near emancipation. Because although the 13th Amendment completely abolished slavery, they put that clause in there because they knew, they being the government, the white man, the enslaver, knew that if they just totally relinquished the enslaved persons, they would not have any way to continue the harvesting, the tilling of the soil, and all the things that the enslaved persons did. That's why in Galveston, Texas, in Texas in general, did you guys know that some enslavers moved their plantations to Texas just so they can continue the institution of slavery? After the emancipation, after the proclamation, after all those things were set in place, they moved their enslaved people to Texas because Texas was because it was so broad, and Union troops had to maintain in the true southern states like Alabama, Mississippi, all those like those deep southern states, the Union Army had to maintain there. So there's very little protection in Texas. And so the order came down 2.5 years later because they wanted to get the last harvesting of the crops. And there weren't very many Black people that could read, because if they were learning how to read, they would be, some bad stuff would happen to them. And so even though it was posted around different spots in Texas, no one was really saying, hey, yeah, we're free, you guys. We don't have to be on a plantation anymore. No one was saying that because they didn't understand until the order came down. And so, except as a punishment for a crime where the party shall have duly convicted. So even today, the institution of slavery is in the prison systems. Prison systems is big business. It's privatized. So you think the state penitentiary belongs to the state? Nope. It doesn't. So that's why I work hard to, teach my young Black men, young men in general, to be smart in their minds, to know their rights so they don't get caught up in a system. Because once they're part of the system, they become a slave. It's just like the book that was written, the 13th, I believe is the name of the book. I forget the name, but she talks about the new Jim Crow. That's what it's called, the new Jim Crow. And she talks about this in her book. The 13th was a Netflix movie. But so this is interesting to me, and we can stay on this topic for a long time because that's the clause, that's the loophole in the 13th Amendment. Because there was shareholding, then there was a thing back right at the 1868, started this thing that was called sharecropping and convict leasing. So convict leasing meant that all the free blacks that were roaming around, because they didn't give them jobs, right? Because they're like, you had a great job, but we didn't pay you. Now you want to get paid, so you don't get a chance to work. They would arrest them for what was called vagrancy. Just, you don't have a job. They would get them for petty theft, stealing an apple, or not walking on the sidewalk. It was crazy laws that they had to continue the bondage of our people. And so as a result of that, they locked them up. And of course, the justice system then was even more corrupt than it is now. And so they would literally be in jail doing hard labor for stealing an apple or stealing a pig or not moving on the sidewalk when a white person walked down the street. That type of stuff, because of this clause, because they had to continue the labor force. So the question is, what are your thoughts on the intentions of the Emancipation Proclamation? Do you truly believe that it was intended to set all enslaved persons free? And if so, why did they put the clause in there in the 13th Amendment? So I'll take a pause for a second while you guys gather your thoughts, and I'm going to see what's in the chat. To this day, you know it, yes. No, don't think so, honestly, okay. White people in a small print. I love it. I love it. Yeah. So, all right. Well, we're just gonna keep it. Wait, there's one more. Let me see. Okay. Yep. They just put the clause in so they didn't lose the power. That's exactly right. You know, because they wanted to. Go ahead, sister. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I wanted to say to your question, I remember reading somewhere in history, like Lincoln didn't necessarily, like, he didn't love the slaves and he wasn't letting them go, but out of love, you know. So for them, it was a strategic move, and definitely to cripple the economic state of the South, because as you know, the South was huge on slavery for cotton, you know, so he wanted to cripple them, and so for them to give in. So that's why he freed the slaves. Yep.
That's right. Yeah. And so in very, very, very wise of Sister Zainab for that point. That's exactly right. Because if it now, you know, the North generated income from the enslaved persons as well, because the cotton boom, you know, in the mid 1840s was, you know, like it quadrupled the amount of income and wealth from the South. But because they had, you know, mills in the North that needed the cotton from the South, they worked together, right? But Abraham Lincoln, in one of his statements, stated that it doesn't matter if I freed a slave. If I free a slave, great. If I don't free a slave, great. I want to maintain the United States. So that was his point. He wanted to keep and preserve the Union. But of course, the South, like Sister Zainab said, they did not want to relinquish their control and their you know, force of making all these millions and billions of dollars on the backs of our ancestors. And so, like Sister Zainab said, the only way to really cripple them and shut them down was to emancipate the slaves. But a bigger component was that once this took place and the emancipation, the northern states, like Virginia's and, you know, North Carolina's, those enslaved persons would flee to the north after they would come through, and they became, you know, an army regiment. The 54th Massachusetts was the first army regiment that was formed from the enslaved persons, because they wanted to fight for their freedom. They wanted to fight for their brothers and sisters that were still enslaved in the southern states. They wanted to show that they could do just as good as a white soldier. And in some cases they did, when they had a chance to actually go on fighting missions, but there weren't very many fighting missions. that they sent them on. And who wants to guess why? Let's think about, why do you think they did not want to equip the newly freed, emancipated Black men with weapons?
Your slave rebellion.
So they had what they called, okay, something's in the chat. Let's see before I speak up. They were scared of revenge. That is perfect. They had a guilty conscience, and they felt so ashamed that if they gave these soldiers weapons, Black enslaved soldiers weapons, that they would turn on us and they would shoot us in the back. But that's not the nature of our people, right? We don't retaliate in that way. All we wanted was our freedom. All we wanted was an opportunity to be free. So they armed them, but they gave them like cook jobs and cleaning jobs. They were behind the lines. So in essence, they were still, even though they wore the uniform and carried weapons, they were still conducting themselves as servants, not as soldiers. So for me, they had to have a clause and a loophole in the 13th Amendment, in the 14th Amendment, and all the amendments that came out of the emancipation, so that they can maintain their control and power over the Black body. And we still see that to this very day with big corporations. And one I know for certain, because I remember reading an article a long time ago, and it had all of these Fortune 500 companies that had stock in privatized prisons, and Walmart was one of them. Walmart was one of the companies that invested in privatized prisons because they want the free labor. Like, you think about it, Walmart has 2 or 3 stores in just certain parts of the, the area in a city. Just imagine across the country. So that would be a lot. They would lose a lot of money trying to pay people to do things the right way. So they task it out to the prisons, and they say, well, it's not necessarily, slavery, because you are getting paid, but 12 cents a day, 12 cents a day is what prisoners earn for 14 hours, 15 hours of labor. So you tell me if that's not slavery. All right, what's next? All right, so we got a understanding of how we're getting to where we are. Here's the journey to recognition. Why did it take so long to become a nationally recognized holiday? Let's see. So it was approximately 42 years from 1979, which is the first Jubilee on record in Galveston, Texas, to 2021. And for that time, Texas was the only state on record that held Juneteenth as a state holiday. They were trying to gain momentum, but it was really just a thing in the South, maybe Louisiana, maybe Mississippi, maybe Alabama, that would somewhat recognize it, because when people started to spread and move out, because there was this thing that was called the Great Migration. That's a whole nother topic, sis, that we have to come back and talk about. But it started to spread a little bit. But now there are more than 28 states, actually not more than 28 states exactly, that actually recognize the state sanctioned holiday from the federal government. Just 28. So that leaves 22 states that still need to recognize Juneteenth. As of June of 2021, all 50 states recognize Juneteenth as a federal holiday, but not all states allow for it to be a paid holiday. So there's a big difference there, because if it's a national, like MLK Day, right? MLK Day is everything shuts down, and every state observes it, recognizes, the third Monday of January as Martin Luther King Day. However, Juneteenth, even though it's a national, now federal holiday, the states still have the right to claim it as a holiday every day, every year on June 19th. And there's only 28 states that said they were going to do that every year. I was doing some research for this, and I believe Alabama said they were going to do something like in September, on a day where it kind of coincides with something else. See, and that's another thing too. Like there's holidays like MLK Day, because right around MLK Day is the birthday of General Robert E. Lee, who was the Confederate general that is revered as God in the South. So they coupled his, the celebrating of MLK and President's Day or whatever they did with recognizing General Lee. So if they're going to do it, they're going to, in the South, in those parts of the country, like Alabama, for example, they're going to couple it with something that still gives rise to their Confederate beliefs. And I'm just like, why can't they just accept the fact that we're here now? We're going to recognize this holiday. We're going to start the healing process, but they just want to hold on to that. And that's why we have the systems that we have. And that's why it's important to have forums like this, so you guys can get some information and start talking about, the travesties that we still see today, and learn to, observe it in the ways that you feel comfortable. But a lot of states in the South, they're holding on to their roots. So it started, the first actual, saying going to Congress, somebody trying to write a bill, happened in 1994 for it to become a federal holiday. Because like I said, it was only Galveston, Texas, and a few other states that kind of recognized it on June 19th. Every year, we're going to have a festival kind of thing. But in 1994, some people wrote a bill for it and it didn't pass. And then they brought it back again in 1997. And again, it didn't pass, right? So again, that makes me think, like, if it wasn't for George Floyd, would it have passed, right? Would it have been, stated? So there's all these things, and I don't mean to sound cynical, but it's just the history that paints the picture for me, that every time, right? Because we talk about the Reconstruction period from 1865 to 1877, there was a period of great growth in the Black community. There were people holding office, there were Black men in the Senate, but that died out because what was birthed during that time? The Ku Klux Klan. Because they refused to allow Black men to govern them. So that's kind of why I have this cynical outlook, because I truly believe that, like we talked about earlier, if it wasn't for George Floyd and Joe Biden feeling how he felt, maybe it wouldn't have happened. Because in two separate incidents, it went all the way up and then got shelved, 1994 and 1997. And it wasn't talked about again until 2020. So our question, even though it's written into law as a federal holiday, do you think it will ever truly be recognized by all states? Why or why not? Let's see what's in the chat. Okay, thank you. Jamila says, it's not being cynical, brother. We have always questioned the motive of things that the government does. I appreciate you. Thank you for that. And it's unfortunate that we always have to question the motives of the government as it pertains to Black bodies, whether that be African-American or Black African-American. It's unfortunate that we have to question. But do we believe? I mean, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that, this is the start. This is the foundation, that more every year will get stronger and stronger and stronger with the recognition or the observance of Juneteenth and all the travesties that took place as a result of getting to that point, to have emancipation and truly setting our brothers and sisters, our ancestry free. Okay, so I think we have one more topic here. Let's see. So, and I have my notes for this one for sure, but here are some ways that we can honor. But I have a letter that I want to read as we get into this. So brothers and sisters, as we approach Juneteenth, a significant day in American history, it's crucial to reflect upon its roots and understand the reason behind its celebration. Juneteenth commemorates the emancipation of enslaved African Americans and stands as a testament to the resilience, strength, and struggle for freedom of Black Americans throughout history. On June 19, 1865, Union General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, and announced the end of slavery, 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued. This delay in spreading the news highlights the systemic issues and deep-rooted injustice that persist even after the abolition of slavery was. While Juneteenth, oopsies, go back. While Juneteenth signifies an important milestone, it also sheds light on the systemic issues that continue to undermine the intentionality behind the holiday's recognition. Generations of racial discrimination, economic disparities, and social injustices have persisted long after the chains of slavery were broken. It is essential to acknowledge and address these challenges to create a more inclusive and equitable society. To honor the history of Black Americans and observe Juneteenth with sincerity, it is important to engage in the actions that promote genuine understanding, empathy, and progress. And so here are some ways that we can do this. And I'll check the chat here. Okay, perfect. Oh, thank you. That was awesome. So educate yourself, which is something that you beautiful people are doing right now. You're becoming more aware. So take the time to learn about history and experiences of Black Americans beyond what is taught in traditional education, which is nothing, to be quite honest. Read books, watch documentaries, and engage in conversations that provide deeper insights into the struggles, achievements, and contributions of Black individuals and communities. And you guys are a part of it, like with your global, parental services and your Mother's Corner. You're inviting everyone. I know your target audience is immigrants, but your door is open to everyone. So educate yourself. Amplify Black voices. Use your platforms such as this, whether it be social media or personal conversations, to amplify the voices and the stories of Black individuals. Share their experiences, perspectives, and create works to foster a more inclusive narrative and challenge stereotypes. And I think that's the biggest thing, because to be quite honest, I encountered a young Muslim sister that had her own views about Black American men. And it was only because of the media. It was only because of what her eye gates took in. And it's unfortunate that we have to challenge the stereotypes that Black Americans are slothful or lazy or uneducated or thuggish or what have you, because we come from a beautiful people that we are all a part of. So we are all the same. We just had a different route to get to this place. Number 3, support Black-owned businesses. Economic empowerment is a vital aspect of addressing systemic issues. Seek out and support Black-owned businesses in your community. By investing in their success, you contribute to a more equitable distribution of wealth and resources. Because if I'm not mistaken, I don't know of any communities that would ever be like Black Wall Street was. And I'm not sure the reasonings why that a lot of Black-owned businesses don't thrive or don't stay intact. Maybe it's because I just recall, I don't know if you guys remember the clothing brand that was called FUBU. It was for us, by us, and it was big letters FUBU, right? But they sold their company, I want to say it was for 25 million. It was either 25 million or $50 million to an Italian company somewhere in Italy that refurbished the brand and made billions of dollars off of it. And so I believe that unfortunately, because we never learned how to have and sustain what we have. Because again, every time we started with something, it was taken from us. It was stolen from us. It was wiped out. And so it's like, why put the effort in if it's only going to be stripped from us anyway, kind of thing. But we have to start. Number 4, advocate for change. Engage in activism and advocacy to challenge systemic racism and promote policies that promote equality and justice. Support organizations working towards social and racial justice, and actively participate in initiatives and campaigns that seek to create positive change, such as this. Right? We have to be unified. Because like I said, when I see a young black brother that's, you know, murdered, or a young Muslim brother that's murdered, it's a life that's lost. That's how I see it. So we have to stand together. Engage in dialogue. One of my buddies, and this it struck me because he said, you know, when he would view my raps, he was like, man, why you always bringing that stuff up? Like, them days is over. And I'm like, bro, it's just a conversation. Let's talk about it. Let's continue the conversation going. We have to continue the conversation. It's not like I'm trying to stir up the hornet's nest because I care about what I believe in. But he said, you should just be quiet about it. You shouldn't, you know, times is different. You shouldn't keep talking about it. Every February, you got to write a rap about our history. And I'm like, yeah, every February, I'm going to write a rap about our history because people need to learn about what happened. Because if they're not getting it, they won't ever get it. The schools aren't going to teach it. So we should have these conversations. So we should engage in dialogue and initiate and participate in meaningful conversations about race, privilege, and equality. Actively listen to the experiences of others and be open to self-reflection and growth. These conversations can be uncomfortable, but are necessary for progress. And so we have to acknowledge and spread the word, right? And so my sisters and brothers, I want to ask you, what can you commit to that will bring awareness to why Juneteenth is an important day to observe? Or is it? So that concludes my presentation. So I put this slide here symbolically to represent, you know, like, I just want you to take a look at this image and think about all that we've talked about within these past 50 minutes. And what do you get from this image, knowing everything that you've just discovered or maybe reimagined within yourself? But what is this image saying to you right now?
Hello?
Hi.
Yeah, hi, brother. Sorry, I'm like in a crowded place, so that's why I couldn't speak earlier. But it kind of like the way I interpret it is like, you know, we're living, but we're not fully like, you know, thriving or breathing. That's what it kind of symbolizes.
I love it. Thank you, Sister Jamila. I love that. There's something in the chat. Thank you so much. Okay. All right. I love it. Okay, so I am going to, I believe it's bigger than Juneteenth. However, all of the things you pointed out are relevant to Black history, future of our children. Very good. So is that Sister Iyas Ali? Is that how we say that?
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay. So I wanna comment on that question, and then I'll continue to read what's in the chat. Speaking of unity, how can we encourage our Black people to stop killing each other? That's a very, very good question that I don't have a direct answer to. I believe the one thing that the reasoning is in certain communities, there's the only word I could use to surmise it is ignorance. And ignorance is not a derogatory term. It simply means unlearned. Because when you think about everything that we just talked about with the enslavement of our people, and then becoming free and having a period of time where there were Black individuals in high places, in offices, but then to have it stripped from us because of, white fear, in the sense of the Ku Klux Klan. And then, moving out of that phase into the early 1900s, but there was still that, legacy of slavery that was there, right? That was there. So my belief is, just to get to quickly answer the question, when they remove the Black man from the home, because of all the things, I'm just looking at the Vietnam War, took a lot of Black men from the home. It left a lot of single mothers to raise children. So you had the Vietnam War in the 70s, and then immediately after that came the war on drugs, which was the Nixon administration and the Reagan administration targeting the Black community. Crack cocaine derived from cocaine, but who brought cocaine into the community? Not Black people, right? And so they were constantly in survival mode, because you think about, sis, 400 plus years of wealth that gave white people a head start. None of the wealth that was generated for the white people went back to Black people. And so they never really had a foundation to stand on. And so that doesn't answer the question as why we're killing each other, but we're constantly in survival mode. And so in order to survive, you feel you have to take somebody out that's competition. And in the hood, all you have is these four walls that box you in. And that was another plot by the government. The projects was designed to have us kill each other, whether it be through drugs and alcohol or through just violence. But I think the thing that will curb that are scenarios like this, where we come and talk and we educate our young brothers and sisters to inform them of their lineage. I tell every Black person, Black American, Muslim, African, that you are a king and a queen. You have royalty in your blood. That's what I tell all my Black brothers. You are king. So you don't have to act like a peasant to get some bread. You're royalty. You just got to grind in the right way and your blessings are going to flow. And so a lot of people don't want to take the time to do that. And so I think educating ourselves is what will help us prevent the violence that we see. I hope that kind of answers it or gives you some clarity. But thank you for your question and your comment. So let's see. All right. Yeah, you're welcome. So go ahead. Go ahead, sis.
Yeah, no, just looking at the picture you asked, for me, the two hands on his throat, I guess I'm interpreting as one of them being like the systems that hold us back and all those things that are put upon us, and the other hand as our own hand kind of holding ourselves back. Like you said, someone, when you, your rap song, someone said, why are you singing about that? And even today, as you noticed, there are not a lot of African Americans besides yourself. There's a lot of people from immigrant backgrounds here. And so we are kind of extending an olive branch or an invitation, but that invitation is not being accepted, so it can't be a one-way street. It's right. When we have to come together and recognize that we are ultimately, like you said, brothers and sisters, and our goal is the same. But a lot of times we get in our own way in advancement, and we don't support Black businesses. We don't support Black people in their cause because maybe they don't look like us. Even if when they do look like us, like someone in your position, Black people don't go out of their way to support you because, maybe they don't want to, or they don't align with your ideas or values or whatever. But I feel like that's what, yeah, and just to clarify, our organization also serves African Americans. We have programs for African American families and communities, but still, it's just that otherization, like, you know, we don't identify with you, despite the fact that we've come from the same motherland, and
Right.
our skin looks the same, you know, we have the same struggles, impacted by the same policies, inequities, but still there's that wall. And so it's very hard for me. That's what I think the two hands on the throat mean.
Yeah. And I love that. And thank you for sharing that, sis. And for me, this it's like a double-edged sword for me, because, you know, when I look into his face, I see that, you know, he's straining, but he's not giving up. Right. And so we've been straining the resilience of our people. I mean, I'm going to stop sharing the screen here. So when we think about the resilience, I'll just tell you guys, and I know we're going to wrap it up here in just a moment, but imagine, right, the inland, the west coast of Africa, when the slave trade really started to become a thing. Because what people don't understand is, like, yeah, there was slavery in Africa, but it wasn't cattle slavery. It was, okay, our tribal village, you know, we took them over, but we're going to still treat them in some humane fashion. But those kings and those queens, they were prisoners of war, so to speak. And so I don't believe they really understood the gravity of what they were sending our people into, because the white man came over and they wanted to do it legit, but they had all of these, they had gold, they had weapons, they had, you know, like tobacco, they had all of these things that Africans weren't used to seeing at that time to offer them. And so it was like, okay, this is a trade. Well, yeah, what, you want our enemy? Sure, take them. We'll take all of your stuff. So that's how it started to become a free thing, where they were getting more and more. And so millions of our brothers and sisters that are ancestors, do you know how many they had to walk thousands of miles just to get to the sea? And then they had to travel across the sea, and even more died on the passage just to get to the Americas. And so from there, let's say we had a ship of 200 people. 100 of them died just because of the sickness and disease on the boat. So you get 100. Of those 100, still even more that made it to land, they died because they just were brittle in their spirit. So now you have about 50 that are remaining. And so those 50 that were then put into bondage, they had to find some strength and some type of resolve to continue to live. And so whenever I talk to anybody, I'm like, man, you were called to live. If you think about everything that our ancestors had to go through to get here, and then to be enslaved and to be treated like an animal, that's why they call it chattel slavery, because you're like cattle. They branded you. They would brand individuals on their chest or inside of their lips or on their face. They would brand them on their backs, marking them as territory. This is my property. So now we get to this place, yeah, we're brittle. We don't have the industries that we do have. And I look at all the, and this is what, if I had a chance to talk to anybody that's in the industry, like Jay-Z, LeBron James, like these types of people, I would say, what are you doing for the community? Because you have millions of dollars, but because we never learned how to have, we don't know how to maintain. So every time we get something, we blow it, because we're really babies. We're really babies in this thing called living, but we have so much power. We have so much resilience. We have so much strength. And I love my people, and I love you. So with that being said, I'm going to be quiet because I can keep going. Sister Zainab knows that. So I'm going to be quiet, but thank you again for allowing me to speak and share what I love, which is the history of my people.
And thank you so much for coming through. Definitely very insightful session and important conversation. And everyone, thank you for your questions and comments. And one other thing I would add to the Juneteenth, what do you call the advice that you gave, is to also interact with people from African-American communities. Just get out of your comfort zone, go talk to someone who's from that community. And I extend the same invitation to our African-American brothers and sisters as well. For anyone who hasn't seen it, I dropped the link to the stipend form. Please go ahead and fill it out. Brother Joe, thank you so much for joining us today. It's so awesome to see you again. Hopefully we'll connect again, you and I, soon after this. But I wanted to say thank you to everyone. And please find a recording of this video soon on our YouTube channel. I dropped the link earlier. And stay tuned for our next session coming soon. Everyone have a good evening. Thank you, Joe.
Of course. Take care, sis.
You too. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.